That's right.
All right, we'll say. So we're gonna do another beautiful piece. Amir, there's salad. It's your input. So we'll say we're gonna Meretz Hashem begin a really beautiful piece tonight. Continuing again in the Inyan of the Churban. There are sheets. If anyone else needs sheets, there should be. So we'll just pass these down if we need any more. Good man. So we're going to do a really beautiful piece tonight. You could see that the topic that we have is Mahus HaAvelos, the essence of the Avelos of Tisha B'Av. What is it that we're mourning? And I will say, I think, the incredible part is as I think as I get older and I come to appreciate things in a different light, you begin to see something incredible in Yiddishkeit. That there is no such thing within our entire religion, no matter how sad or how overwhelming or how emotionally crushing, that doesn't have some level of positivity, some level of optimism, of hope embedded within it. And the truth is, the amazing part is, Tisha B'Av is no different. Now the truth is, you'll say, oh yeah, of course, because we know that what happens on Tisha B'Av, at Chatzos, we flip over, right? At Chatzos, we go ahead and we switch. Fundamentally, everything switches at Chatzos, right? From sitting on the ground to pulling back to Parochas to a whole bunch of other kulas that ultimately, again, set in once Chatzos comes. But Lamaisi, even before Chatzos, even embedded in the very character of Tisha B'Av itself, we're going to see something amazing. So I'll say, so take a look over here. Sefer HaKadosh Priya Aretz. I will say the Sefer Priya Aretz was Rav Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk. So the Rebbe of Vitebsk says something beautiful. He says, Ma'ala Timia Odos Inyan Atzar Va'eval Al Churban. I will say, you know how like your whole life you're thinking about a question, but you never really want to articulate it because it sounds like a shtickle like apikarsos. Anyone ever had an experience like that? Yeah. Oh wow, such a tzaddikim over here. All right, all right, fine. I'll be the shaykers. Right? So I'm saying you're walking around with a question and it's bothering you, but you've never seen it asked, you've never heard anyone else articulate it.
We've all been to yeshiva.
I'm sorry. So you kind of just sit in the corner. So look what the Priya Aretz asks. He says, "Hello, masha avar ayin." So the Priya Aretz essentially says, "What are we doing? What is it that we're doing? We're sitting here, we're mourning over a Beis Hamikdash. What was. What was. Ki ma'amar ashrei adam mefachei tamid hu ala asid." Even when Shlomo says, ashrei adam mefachei tamid, praiseworthy is the person who's in a perpetual state. It's not really, pachad doesn't have to mean fright. Pachad could also mean cognition. Person who's constantly aware, that's a person who's mefachid about losing out on opportunities in the future. Shlomo is not saying ashrei adam mefachid tamid on his past. I will say, I gave you the mashal. The Be'er Chaim, Melech B'Rimi gives a great mashal about how to relate to your past versus your future. I think I've said it here in the shir. He says that imagine you're driving, and what happens? You go ahead and you look the entire time in the rear view mirror. Right? So what happens if you drive and you look the entire time in the rear view mirror? You get into an accident. Right? So Melech B'Rimi says, how many people live life constantly looking in the rear view mirror? They never look at it. They're always focused on the past. So how do you live a proper life? Now again, to never check your rear view mirror is also irresponsible. So life has to be this incredible balance between every once in a while checking back, learning from being cognizant of what's in back of me, but the bulk of my time is spent on what's in front of me. So asks the tzaddik of Vitebsk, what are we doing? What are we doing? We're so preoccupied, spending so much time focusing on the Churban. Mata hava hava. What happened, happens. What happened. It's done. It's thousands of years ago. Wouldn't we be better off focusing our energies on what lies ahead? So second paragraph. And he strengthens the question. The mehad dematzinu sheka'asher nasa David hamelech es eshes Uriah achiti shalach lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'yad Nasan hanavi gam habin hayilod lecha mos yumas va'az vayivakish David es Elokim b'yad hanar vayitzom David tzom uba v'lon v'shachav arza. So we know the story. This is in the aftermath of the episode of David and Bathsheba. So remember again, Bathsheba gives birth to a baby. The Navi comes to David HaMelech and says, ultimately, again, the baby's going to die. And the baby gets sick. And David HaMelech is mamish, fasting, davening, pulling out all the supplicatory stops and doing whatever is within his power to be able to go ahead and save his son. And then something amazing happened. Ulam, mishenodalo shemes hayeled. Once he knew that the child had died, shuv, vayirchatz, vayasech, vayachalof esim lo sav, vayasimu lo lechem, vayochal. So I will say this is incredible. It's actually an amazing story. The baby dies, Nebuch, and what does David HaMelech do? He gets up, he washes himself, he anoints himself, he takes off his trunk clothing, puts on regular garments, and sits down to eat. The servants see David HaMelech's behavior and say, "What's the matter with you?" Well, I mean, they didn't say it like that because he's the king. Uleshela savadav, ma hadavar hazeh asher asisa, ba'avur hayeled chayt samta batefch, v'ka'asher meis hayeled kamta batochal lechem. So we'll say the servants of David didn't understand his behavior. When the baby's alive, albeit sick, right? You're fasting, you're crying, you're not eating. Now your baby just died. And now what? And now you're going to go ahead and change and eat and conduct yourself like in a normal fashion? Doesn't make any sense. Right? To both say, what's the derech ha'olam? The derech ha'olam is that one's pain intensifies with death. It doesn't lessen. So the Avodim say to David, we don't understand what it is that you're doing. So what happens? And David HaMelech says something amazing. He says, V'heshiv, ba'od hayalad chayt samta va'efka. It's true. When the baby was alive, I fasted, I cried. Ki amarti mi yodea, v'chaneni Hashem, v'chay hayalad. Because I said to myself, look, who knows? You know, we'll say, one of the most important lessons that David HaMelech had, you know, there is a, we're familiar with the story, we've said it, we've learned it so many times in different contexts. The story of when Chizkiyahu was on his deathbed. Right, Chizkiyahu was a great-great-grandson of David HaMelech. Chizkiyahu is on his deathbed. Remember again, Yeshayahu, the Navi comes to visit him. And what does Yeshayahu say to Chizkiyahu? Right, it's like on the top 3 things not to say to someone you're being Mevaker Chola, which is, you're going to die, right? Right? Generally not good, Bikur Chola etiquette. Well, this is besides that the Yeshayahu and Chizkiyahu didn't have a good relationship. So what happens? Yeshayahu says to Chizkiyahu, you're going to die. So again, they get into a whole, right? This is where Chizkiyahu didn't want to get married, didn't want to have a child, because he saw Baruch HaKodesh that if he would have a son, his son would be a Rasha, so he doesn't get married. And remember again, so here you have Yeshayahu, tells Chizkiyahu you're going to die, and what does Chizkiyahu say? No. I have a Masorah, I have a tradition from my father's home that what? Afilu cherev chada munachas al tzavaro shel adam. Even if there is a sharp sword resting against a person's neck, al yimana atzma min harachamim. You don't give up. So we'll say, you see, where did Chizkiyahu get this from? Where did this come from? This came from the Zayd, the David HaMelech. When the baby's alive, you don't give up. It doesn't matter what the doctors say. It doesn't matter what anyone says. It doesn't even matter what the Navi says, by the way. Because here the Navi told David HaMelech the baby's going to die. It doesn't make a difference. Where there is life, there is hope. Where there is life, there is hope. As long as there is life, there is always the ability to turn things around. Maybe not b'derech hatava, maybe it has to be an ace, but there's always the ability to turn things around. But once there's death, that's it. That's it. You can't affect change. Right? You know, the scariest part of death is not the cessation of life. That's because we believe in Olam Haba. So that's not what scares me about death. What scares me about death is once I die, I can't affect change within myself. Whatever I did. Whatever mitzvahs I did, whatever averos I did, that's it. That's what's locked in. That's what I've got for eternity. So David HaMelech says to his servants, when the baby was alive, of course I cried, I fasted, I did everything. The baby's dead. Biata shemes lama ze anitzam. David HaMelech says, now that the baby has passed away, why should I fast? What good is that going to do? And look at his words. Ha'ucha lahashiv od. Rebbe said, by the way, it's such a profound statement. What's that? Ha'ucha lahashiv od, which means what? How would you translate that? Can I bring him back? Is anything I'm going to do going to make a difference right now? Can I bring him back? Actually, the rest of the pasuk is heartbreaking. Where David HaMelech then says, Lashon HaPasuk is David HaMelech says, I know that I forgot the exact Lashon, but David HaMelech says, I know that he will not come back to me, but I will go to him. That was the Lashon HaPasek. Very profound. Those you should know, by the way, there's a halacha like this in Shulchan Aruch. The halacha, the Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Avelos in Yeridea says that an Avel is not allowed to say, I would give anything to change these circumstances. Which, by the way, is so interesting, because one of the most natural things for a person to say in the midst of loss, especially tragic loss, is, I would give anything to change these circumstances. So why are you not allowed to say those words? Why not? So it could be me. I think even simpler. It could be even simpler. Why can't you say it? So first of all, everything is from Hashem. There's a concept of tziduk kadin. Good. Even if you don't, that by itself is like a level. It's like a level. Let's say I'm not on that level. There's even something simpler. What's simpler? It's an exercise in futility. Why are you wasting energy on things that will not yield any productive results? You want to talk about how much you want to change. You can't change what happened, right? The person died. The person passed away. There'll be Tchias HaMesim one day, but until then, this is what it is. So to spend your time thinking about what if, what could, if only, it's an exercise in futility. And Chazal understood that the way that people are able to go ahead and move past loss is through acceptance. If you don't have acceptance, right, that's the first step in grief. If you don't, well, denial is the first step in grief, but I'm saying the first step in rehabilitating oneself is acceptance. If I don't accept that it is what it is, right, and after acceptance, I could come to the theological components, that it's all from Hashem. I could grow even more with that ultimately is Latova. So that's what David Melech is telling his servants. So we'll say, see, here what's happening over here? Here what's happening? So the Priya Aretz says, we have biblical precedent from David HaMelech, which is, once something is done, what's the proper approach? What's the proper approach? Move on. And so it says, Hare, she David HaMelech even. David HaMelech understood, Kilo shayach lehis avel uleitsta'er uleis onin la'achar maisa. David HaMelech understood there is no point in mourning after the fact. So again, here the Pri Arv is saying, I don't understand. We're hyper-focused. I want to say the truth is, we're hyper-focused all year around on the Churban. But especially Tisha B'Av. I just want to point out, just so you understand like how overwhelming the Avelis is, Rabbi say, that it comes Sunday morning, we don't put on tefillin. A Yid starts his day with tefillin every single day. Right? Again, let's say, we saw this. Which Masechta did we have it in? What was before Yevamos? Okay, I'm not the only one doesn't remember. What was before Yevamos?
Was
it Moed Cotton? Chagiga. So we had in Chagiga, I think it was Chagiga or Tainus, I think it was Chagiga, that the Gemara says, what's an example of Poshe Yisrael Begufan? What's an example of a Jew who sins with his body? You remember what the Gemara says? Right? A person, so that's Choser Milchama, but the Gemara says someone, a karkaf, she'ino maniyach tefillin. A person who doesn't put on tefillin is considered to be, again, chote begufo, sitting. Shabbos says, just to show you, like, okay, so we're going to put it on the afternoon. So Shabbos say, again, with the risk of sounding morose, like, you don't know what happens in the morning and the afternoon. No one knows what happens in the morning and the afternoon. So I'm going to bank on the fact, I'm not going to put on tefillin in the morning, banking on the fact that I'm going to put tefillin on in the afternoon, not knowing my yovo yom, what any particular day brings. That's how overwhelming the Avelos of Tisha B'Av is. So ask the Pri Arutz, what's going on over here? The power of the Jew is the ability to be a forward-thinking individual. The power of the Jew is not to spend life looking in the rearview mirror. The power of the Jew is when there is life, do whatever you can to preserve life. But once there is death, once there is finality, once there's Gzar Din, once it's done, move on. So Pri Arutz asks, how does this stem with what we do for Avelos? Come, you're going to say something.
I'm not sure if this is the direction he's going to be heading, but there's even, in my mind, there's a sharper question. Because David HaMelech had a son to mourn over. We never had a Beis HaMikdash to mourn over. Right.
Great. He doesn't say that, but I think that's an excellent ta'ara. Right. Here, Mamish, it was, to put it even a little bit more sharply, it was Meso Muta Lefanov. Right? The Navi doesn't say, by the way, that they buried the baby and then David went ahead and got up and changed and ate. It sounded like everything just happened instantaneously. The baby died, and David says, okay, the chapter's closed. The chapter's closed. So we'll say it's a good kasha. No, tell me, no one here was bothered by this. I've always been bothered by this. Always been bothered by this because it really seems, in many respects, that the way we approach Tisha B'Av is fundamentally antithetical to everything else we do in Yiddishkeit. We are such forward-thinking, hopeful, optimistic people who look in the rearview mirror, reflect on the past, but do not get lost in it. So look what the Priya Aretz writes. Obiyoser kasha. He says, I'm going to bolster the kasha more. Halo ha'atzvos hi aklipa hayoser kasha mikulam. So the Rebbe says something amazing. He says, there's another problem. What's the other problem with mourning? Atzvos, sadness, Rebbe was saying, is the greatest barrier to avodas Hashem. Atzvos, sadness, it's incredible. Rabbi Nachman, Zchus Yagin Aleinu, writes extensively about this, or his writings, his teachings are extensively quoted in the Kuti Maharan about this, where the Rebbe says that the Yetzer Hara's greatest tool to derail our avodas Hashem is atzvos, is sadness. Get a person to be depressed, get a person to be sad, get a person to give up on themselves, and you're done. You don't need Yetzer, I don't need to get anybody to sin. I don't need to get you to sin. I just need you to be sad. I just need you to give up. Because once you give up, that's it. Once you give up anyway, you're done. You're down and out. You're down and out. So the Rebbe says, Priya says, we're institutionalizing atzvos, right? We're encouraging atzvos. The din, the halacha of the day, is atzvos. So says the Rebbe, how does this work? Shari avodah zara nikreis ashma. This is incredible, by the way. Look at the Zahara. He says, avodah zara itself is called atzvos. Atzabehem kesef v'zav. V'chein ein la la'atzvos shaychos imachashon. This is incredible. He says the word atzabehem, which refers to avodah zara, is from lashon of atzuv, of sadness. Avodah zara is sad. Why is avodah zara sad? Because it's sheker. Because avodah zara distracts a person from their true avodah in life, which is avodas Hashem. So it says the Rebbe, sadness creates such a barrier between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'in shchina shora elu mitoch simcha. Quotes the Gemara Masechah Shabbos. Furthermore, the shchina only rests on a person in a state of simcha. So we'll say, you hear the kasha. It's profound. It's profound, which just calls into question our entire relationship to Tisha B'Av and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So look what he writes, the end of 183. So we'll say, get ready for this. So it goes over the Yerushalmi. Heartbreaking Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi says, any generation in which the Beis Hamikdash was not rebuilt in its generation, it's as if the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed in that generation. So we'll say, so in general, it's a very hard Yerushalmi to understand. But what does that mean? What does that mean? So first of all, again, it's my fault. Why is it anymore my fault? The last generation, next year, it's in general also like collective guilt is always a fascinating theological idea. Now we know that it's true because there's a concept of Arabos, a concept of Klaisor Rebim Zebazeh. Look what it is. Vahezber Bazeh, Keme'acha Shalom Nivna, page 184. Abayis Ba'osadar, Muchach Mizeh Sha'adayin Enam Ru'oyin Lehigal, Machmas Ma'aseyem Aroim. Because it was on a very pashut level. If the Beis Hamikdash is not rebuilt in our generation, it shows that what? We're not right. We're not worthy. Which means if we're not worthy to have it rebuilt, then apparently what? We're no better than the generation that lost it. We're no better than the generation that lost it. Which I will say is a fascinating idea. Because I often thought about this as well. Which is, in order to go ahead and get back to Beis Hamikdash, do we have to be as good as they were before the downward spiral? Are we measured by a different darga? So again, these are dvar ma'on b'no sha'olam. It's up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu what we need. But l'maisa, what the Priya Aretz is saying, is that if the Beis Hamikdash is not rebuilt in my generation, then ultimately, again, that's reflective that we're no better than the generation who lost the Beis Hamikdash. V'lachein, tzarich leizbonen ki'ilu nechrav b'yamav. Ki ma'asav asher heimanu hatov she'ein hu im habeis hamikdash shecholim ladar ba'olam echad. We'll say it's a very overwhelming Gemara. It's a very overwhelming Gemara because sometimes, like, when we think about the generation, in which the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. I was just learning Bar Mitzvah next Shabbos. Akiva Weinberg, says, sweet boy, he's being Messiah. He's going to make a siyam on Maseches Makos. It's actually pretty amazing, by the way, because the last Gemara Maseches Makos is the Gemara Rabbi Akiva is going up on Har Habayis, right? And you have Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Gamliel, everyone together, and they're seeing the Har Habayis in a state of destruction, in a profound state of destruction. So what's fascinating again is, the whole exchange. They start, the fox comes out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, they start crying, he starts, so just as an aside, it's incredible. This bar mitzvah boy, his name is Akiva, and his bar mitzvah is on Shabbos Nachamu, and he's making a siyam on Maseches Makos. I just found this out tonight. We learned the last piece together. I'm sorry? Drush is done. No, the truth is, I gave it to him. I said, this is his pshetel. This is his pshetel. So I did, but I'm just saying, sometimes you see these things and it's like, wow, Ribbono Shel Olam really, really pulls the strings on anything and everything that happens in this world. So I'll say, listen to this. So therefore, the idea over here is, we think if we don't get the Beis Hamikdash, okay, we haven't risen to the level of requisite righteousness. But the truth is, what the Yerushalmi is highlighting over here is something additional, which is that halacha l'maisa, if we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, that's also an indictment. That it means that we are like the generation who lost it. So in other words, had our generation lived at the time of the Churban, we wouldn't have saved the Mikdash either. Which is an overwhelming statement, I will say. And if you think about it, it's very heavy. It's very heavy. And it's a profound generational indictment. And it's hard to understand that a little bit because we think about previous generations, and we look at our generation. I don't know, you look at Klal Yisrael now, I think Klal Yisrael is doing amazing. I think Klal Yisrael is doing great, Baruch Hashem, on so many different levels. Are there challenges? Of course, but there are always challenges. But yet here the Gemara is telling me that if I don't get the Beis Hamikdash back, then I am just as culpable as the generation who lost it. And I will say, here we go. B'yisod ha'amar nimsa. Here we go. I will say this line, get ready for your life to change. You might want to have another bite of the eggplant, or something beforehand, a little l'chaim, because your life is about a salad. It was a soft hint. So I'll tell you, your life is about to change. Look what the Rebbe says. B'yisod ha'amar nimsa. What's the avodah Rebbe Saif Tisha B'Av? Shebechol dar vadar chayiv adam liros es atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miYerushalayim. You ever hear a phrase like that? Bechol dar vadar chayiv adam liros es atzmo. In every single generation, a person is supposed to view themselves as if they left Yerushalayim. I will say, of course, over here, the Priya Aretz, also quoting from the Chassam Sofer, is borrowing, of course, the phrase that we have in Arvei Psachim, right? The Mishnah Arvei Psachim, B'chol Dar Vadar. I'm sorry? With Ravinu David, right? With Seltzer, right? That's lukewarm. That's hot. That's Rish's hot. And so what's interesting is that remember again, what does the Gemara say? I think he said Sukkah, not Psachim. I think he wanted a Sukkah. Right. So what does the Gemara say? B'chol dar vadar chayiv adam liros es asmo ki ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. Right. That's the mitzvah at the Leil HaSeder. Right, the mitzvah on the Leil HaSeder is to go ahead and see yourself as if you left Egypt. In other words, the whole yesod of Pesach is not to celebrate the historical event. The whole yesod of Pesach is to go ahead and dip into the past, bring it into the future, and create a relevant contemporary experience. Writes the Priya Aretz. That is the same avoda by Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is not about mourning the past. Isn't that incredible? Tisha B'Av is not about mourning the past. That's not what it's about. So what is Tisha B'Av about? Chayiv adam liros es atzmo ki ilu hu yatsa miYerushalayim, says the Priya Aretz. And I will say, what does that mean in a practical level? On a basic level, the way the Priya Aretz is understanding it is that if the Beis Hamikdash is not rebuilt in my generation, then I and my generation are just as culpable and just as liable as the Dar who lost the Beis Hamikdash. See, I will say, it's not the pshat that they were terrible, and just Klal Yisrael has not risen to the requisite level of piety. It's that, no, if I don't have a Beis Hamikdash, then I'm the same as them. We look at this drive, kamsa by kamsa, and we say to ourselves, oh my gosh, rishos, terrible. It is rishos. But lamaisa, if I don't have a Beis HaMikdash, that means kamsa bar kamsa is unfolding every single day also. That's what it means. The same ills and the same difficulties and the same challenges that are plaguing Klal Yisrael when the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed are the same things that are present. That says the Rebbe is what's going on over here. It's not the pshat that we're focusing on the past. That's not the pshat, because that's antithetical to Yiddishkeit. Yiddishkeit does not live just constantly watching the rear view mirror. We live in the present. We live in the future. We build ourselves up. So the avoda of Tisha B'Av, chayiv adam liros es atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mirushalayim. I have to view myself as if I am one of the members of the generation who lost the Beis HaMikdash. Because if the Beis HaMikdash is not rebuilt in my days, then I share that same level of culpability as my ancestors did. He says, just like on Pesach night, at the end of the day, we're obligated to celebrate as if we left Mitzrayim. So to the Avelus, ultimately again, of Tisha B'Av is the same idea. That halacha l'maisa, as if we left Yerushalayim ourselves. V'ainu machmas ha'amar de'me'ach sh'limna b'yamav kilu nechra b'yamav. Shabbos say, what an incredible yesod. You're right, it's not about a historical event. The Priya Aretz, his kashas were good. For his own kasha, the David HaMelech, the kashas are good kashas. But at the end of the day, says the Priya Aretz, we're not focusing on the past. I'm focusing on the present. I'm focusing on the fact that if I don't have a Beis HaMikdash, then Lamaisa, what that tells me is that halacha Lamaisa, I am in a state of disrepair as well. And my state of disrepair is just as acute as the generation who lost the Mikdash. Suppose I want to take the Priya Aretz one step further. You know what is interesting? It's interesting. Oh, is this the storm alerts? Okay. Good. Shabby, you better eat something quickly. We don't know what's coming over here, right? So I'll tell you something interesting, which is, because I just saw this phrase. I never saw this phrase by the Priya Aretz before. The profound use sort of right of Shebechol Darvadar Chayiv Adam Liros Etz Atzmo Ki'ilu Hu Yatzam Yushan. Which, by the way, I just want to point out that when we say the kina, ultimately again of B'tseisi Mimitzrayim and B'tseisi Mirushalayim, I will say this kina takes on a new meaning as well, which is we link these experiences in a dramatic way, right? Remember again, that's towards the end of Kinnis. B'tseisi Mimitzrayim, B'tseisi, and it's a contrast. It's a profound kina because it's a contrast between the experience of the Exodus, which was Simcha, and the experience of Galus, of exile, which was heartbreaking. And now we see, according to the Priya Aretz, the resounding profundity of that particular kapitel, because the truth is, the experiences really are fundamentally linked. That in the same way, Chayiv Adam Liros Es Atzmo, Ki'ilu Hu Yatsa Mimitzrayim, is Chayiv Adam Liros Es Atzmo, Ki'ilu Hu Yatsa Mirushalayim. So we'll say, but we'll end with one last piece. I want to show you something interesting. The name Yerushalayim. Right, so we'll say, Yerushalayim, the most incredible place in the entire world. Right, so remember again, the first time we find the reference to Yerushalayim is where? In Parashas Lech Lecha, Avram Avinu comes back right from the war of the 4 kings against the 5. So what happens? The Torah says, "Malki Tzedek Melech Shalem Hotzi Lechem B'Yayin V'Koin Lekel Elyon." Malki Tzedek, Rashi identifies with Shem ben Noach. He went ahead. He was the king of Shalem. The king of Shalem. Okay, who knows what's Shalem? So the Ebenezer already writes Shalem is Yerushalayim. That's fine. Except there's only one problem, which is Torah doesn't call it Yerushalayim. Torah calls it Shalem. So we'll say there's a beautiful medrash. The medrash in Bereshis Rabbah, in Parshas Vayera, writes as follows: by the Akedah. So the pasuk says, "Vayikra Avram, Shema Makomahu Hashem Yireh." So the pasuk says Hashem called that place What's that place? So specifically, again, it was the Harabayis, because that's where the Akedah took place. Avram called it Hashem Yir'eh. So the Medrash says so beautifully. The Medrash writes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't know what to call the city. Can you imagine? Baruch Shalom says, what should I call the capital of the world? What should I call the most important place in the entire universe? What should I call the most beautiful and holy geographic location known to man? What should I call it? He says, Imani Koreosa Shalem Avram Adam Tzadik Misraim. So I'm sorry, he says over here, he says, if I call, I'm sorry, Im Kore Ani Oso Yir'eh Kishem Shekaroso Avram Shem Adam Tzadik Misraim. So if I go ahead and I call it Yir'eh, like Avram called it, then ultimately again Malki Tzedek Shem is going to get upset. And if I call it Shalem, then Avram Avinu is going to get upset. So what should I call it? El Hareni Kore Oso Yerushalayim. I'll call it Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim, I will say, which by the way, if you think about it, is so profound. Where does Yerushalayim get its name? Where does it get its name? So where does it get its name? From Shalom, right? Shem calls it Shalem, and Melchizedek Shem calls it Shalem. Avram Avinu calls it Yir'eh. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I can't call it one over the other. It has to show, which I will say, by the way, is why. If there's one place in the world where a person has to be makbid on Shalom and on Kavod Abrios and on Beid Anul Nechavero, it's in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh, which is why I will say, these things, wherever there is the greatest Kedusha, is also where you'll often find the greatest Tumah. And I will say, so I'll give you an example. If you look at what happened, I think we spoke about this last week a little bit also, maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe not. I was thinking it. So, we saw what happened by the Egalitarian Plaza, by the Kosel, a couple of weeks ago, where people who, I guess, describe themselves as Kanoim, come and disrupt, I don't know what they were doing over there, whatever they were doing, right? Ripping up Sidurim. That's what the Ribbon Shalom wants. That's now again, you could have your own opinions as to what should happen at the Kosel, where it should happen at the Kosel. You could have your own opinions on different streams of Judaism. Everyone is entitled to their own opinions. But Lamaisa, to act in such an abhorrent fashion, to act in a way that disparages and visceral hatred towards another Jew, calling other Jews names, let's say, an entire Beis Hamikdash is worth nothing. It's like we don't learn. So here you have Jews literally despising other Jews in the name of God, right at the site that was lost because of Sinas Chinam. And just to be totally fair, it goes all the way. It's no different than when the women of the wall tried to provoke him, sneak in a Sefer Torah, even though they're not supposed to. What are we doing? And I will say it's incredible. How come it is that these things don't happen anywhere else in the world? Right? They only happen in Yerushalayim. Only happen in Yerushalayim. Like, let it happen in Brooklyn, right? Do it in Lakewood, right? Not in Baltimore. We're optimistic people over here, right? Take it somewhere else. Why do it in Yerushalayim? But it makes sense. It makes sense because Yerushalayim is the epicenter of Shalom. The name itself comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu not wanting to. The Rebbe Shalom could do whatever he wants. He could call whatever he wants by whatever name he wants. But he dafka constructs a name that incorporates Malki Tzedek's names because he doesn't want to make Peirud. He doesn't want to make a separation between Jews. He doesn't want someone to be offended. So in the city that is founded on the foundation of Shalom, you find the worst levels of Sinas Chinam. And it's not an accident. It's not an accident. The Maharal says, this dynamic, where's the first time we find this dynamic? When Rivka Imenu was pregnant, the pasuk says, Vaisrotetsu habanim bekirba. Yaakov and Esav, they're fighting in the womb. I affect the Maharal. What do you mean they're fighting in the womb? What are they fighting over? What are they fighting? The Gemara tells us, a child doesn't get a Yetzirah until you come into the world. What are they fighting over? The Maharal says, even in the womb, Yaakov and Esav were the embodiment of good and evil. And good and evil cannot occupy the same space. They can't occupy the same space. So if you put good and evil in the same place, there's going to be constant conflict. So Yerushalayim, which is the source of all Kedusha in the world, you'll often find the most visceral and despicable types of tumah and hatred. So I will say that's Yerushalayim. So the name Yerushalayim, Yira Shalem. So perhaps we could take the Rebbe's concept just a little bit further. See, I will say, what's the pshat in the phrase? Like the Rebbe said, "B'chol dar v'dar chayiv adam liros es atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miYerushalayim." That perhaps embedded in that phrase is a secret to Geula as well. I will say, if we want to get out of his galus, and we truly want the Bayis Shlishi, the secret is in his formulation. Shebechol dar v'dar chayiv adam liros es atzmo. A person has to view himself ki'ilu hu yatsa, as if he's ready to leave, or as if he left Yerushalayim. What's Yerushalayim? Yira Shalim. We'll say, do you know what the greatest problem in life is? Let's be honest, we're amongst friends eating milchiks, right? So it's a good time for honesty, right? So what's our greatest problem? That we view ourselves as complete finished products. I'm good. Okay, maybe a tweak over here, a tweak over there. I've got a little dent over here, a little scratch over here. But otherwise, I'm good. I'm fine. I was saying, when a person views themselves as I'm fine, it's like a spiritual death sentence, like a spiritual flat line. We're all great. We all have wonderful things about us, but we're not fine. We're not shalom. We're not complete. We have so much work to do. I mentioned this. I don't know who I was talking about this with the other night. We spoke about this a few weeks ago on Shabbos about the sinas chinam. It will say, we often translate sinas chinam how? As baseless hatred. What's the problem? There's no such thing as baseless hatred. What does that mean? Baseless hatred means like, I just hate you because I want to hate you. There's no such thing like that. In other words, I might hate someone, but I always have a reason why I hate them. You never hate someone for no reason. I will say, what's sinas chinam? The word chinam we find used by Klal Yisrael when they complain, when they're in the midbar, and something went wrong, and what do they say? Zacharnu asadaga asha achalnu chinam. We remember the fish we ate for free. And Rashi HaKadosh says, really? You got fish? Paro wouldn't give you straw, but he gave you fish? Chinam Rabosai means without responsibility. What does sinas chinam mean? Sinas chinam means that when there's a fractured relationship and no one takes responsibility to fix it. Not my problem. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not the aggressor. I'm not the problem. I'm just going to leave it alone. And Rabosai, so you see, we think like godless is, I made the problem, I'll clean up my mess. That's godless. But if I didn't make the problem, it's not my issue. It's not my issue. You wronged me. You're objectively wrong. I'm objectively right. You want to fix it? The onus is on you. I have no responsibility. And that's sinas chinam. Sinas chinam is when you say, I have no responsibility. I'm shalom. I'm good. I'm free and clear. There is nothing on me to do. And that's why the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. When people think that they're fine, people think that they're complete, people think that they're shalom, a person thinks I have no more work to do, there's no geula in that. And perhaps that's the pshat of what the Rebbe is saying. Chayiv Adam Liros says Asmu Kilu Hu Yatzam Yerushalayim means two things. Number one, it means that we don't observe or we don't mourn the Churban as a historical event. We mourn the Churban as a contemporary event. Because if we have not yet merited to regain a Beis HaMikdash, it means that our generation is just as culpable as the one that lost it. But embedded in those same very words is the key to success. If we want the Beis HaMikdash back, Chayiv Adam Liros Es Atzmo, Ki'ilu Hu Yatza Mirushalayim, Ki'ilu Hu Yatza Meira Shalem. I have to leave the state of mind where I view myself as being complete. I have to leave the state of mind where I leave myself as viewing myself as a finished product. I'm good. Of course, we're all good. We're all great, but we're all a work in progress. And the moment that I think my work is done, the moment I think I've reached the finish line, the moment I think there's nothing to correct, or the moment I think that I don't have a responsibility to correct that which is wrong in my relationships, is the moment that the Churban unfolds again and again and again. Such a profound yesod. How do we go ahead and get out of this galus? You have to leave Yerushalayim. Not physical Yerushalayim, but emotional Yerushalayim. To leave the mindset of viewing myself as a finished product and recognizing that we're each a work in progress. And I both say sometimes in life, something's not your fault. Something's not your fault. But just because it's not your fault doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to fix it. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says something so beautiful. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh comes actually in Pirkei Avos, and in Perush and Pirkei Avos, he says that if you see something broken in this world, even if you didn't break it, the reason Hashem is showing it to you is because you have the ability to fix it. You see, we often think that the only things I'm obligated to fix are what? The things I break. But if I didn't break it, okay, maybe I'll say a kapitel of Tehillim for you. But Lamaisa, like if I didn't break it, I don't have a responsibility to fix it. But it's not true. If you see it, it means you could do something about it. If we could just leave the mindset of yira shalim, viewing ourselves as complete, there's no telling what could happen. So I'll say we should be zochem yatz Hashem. There's still time. Even though the Gemara says that Eliyahu Hanavi doesn't come on Erev Shabbos, right? But yeah, I tell you, I've always viewed those Gemaras. Kadosh Baruch Hu could do whatever he wants, right? So if he wants to skip Eliyahu Hanavi and just bring Mashiach, or if he wants to bring Eliyahu Hanavi very early in the morning so that there's still time to prepare for Shabbos, or he just wants to totally just supplant that and do a new process, he's the Ribono Shel Olam, and he could do whatever he wants. And I will say, imagine if we tap into the power of Erev Shabbos Chazon. We say to ourselves, you know what? I'm going to start fixing the things that are broken, even if they're not my fault. I'm going to start fixing the things that are broken, that I know about, that I see, even if I did not cause them to be broken. I'm going to stop looking at myself as a finished product and start leaving Yiras Shalim, start leaving Yerushalayim, that Yerushalayim. I'm just going to start living differently, start being differently. I will say, if we all adopted that new mindset, then at the end of the day, although we would be leaving our cognitive, emotional Yirasham Yerushalayim, would be Zochem Eretz Hashem to enter back into real Yerushalayim. We should be Zochem Eretz Hashem to internalize the words of the Rebbe, to internalize the words of the Priyat Tzaddik, to be able to connect with the Churban as a contemporary event, to be able to leave Yerushalayim, and in the schos of leaving our personalistic Yerushalayim, we be Zochem Eretz Hashem to enter into a rebuilt Yerushalayim with the Melech HaMashiach, with the Bayish Shlishi, B'mihira B'yameinu. Amen.
How's that how are you?
Oof.